You hear that? You hear that? That's special. There's a lot of lions, tigers, and bears, but there ain't but one Razorback.
McFadden, say goodbye. Darren McFadden, 80 yards, touchdown.
Fly ball, deep left field. Out of here. Madden for maybe the win. Oh, the follow is good. Arkansas in overtime. I think he just made SportsCenter again. Arkansas is in hog heaven. They won the first ever national championship.
All I want you to do tonight is play your best. Don't worry about making a mistake. You can make a mistake, that's fine, as long as you're going 100 miles an hour.
Another close game, another tough loss for the Razorbacks. Welcome into episode 47 of the Woo Pig Weekly podcast in the home field studio, your weekly source for all things Arkansas Razorbacks. Episode 47 is brought to you by Home Field Apparel. They're the home of premium vintage collegiate apparel. You can use our promo code Variety Sports in all caps to receive 15% off your first order. Go check them out. We say this week in and week out, but they really do got some awesome stuff. A lot of cool Razorback stuff, different sports, must-win gear, football gear, baseball gear, you name it, they probably got it. And, they're actually decently priced. So, go check them out and you can get that additional 15% off, like we said, thanks to Variety Sports Network. So that's Variety Sports in all caps for that promo code. And we'll just jump in here. There's no easy way to put it. Arkansas came up short against Ole Miss where they lost 27-20, where I felt like this whole game, we were in the game the entire time. We led the game at some point. It's one of those things where, again, offense let us down. Defense played a heck of a game to keep us in this game against especially a very electric Ole Miss offense in the past few weeks prior to our game. They put up a lot of points, and for Arkansas to come in and our defense hold them to 27 points, and I believe it was like only 129 yards in the first half. That's incredible for our defense to do. Our offense just couldn't come around and help us out there. So, basic thoughts before we dive into stats here, Seth.
Yeah, same thing, man. Defense really played a heck of a game. I actually thought this was probably the best game they played front to back on the season against a quality opponent. I mean, we've looked good in spurts, obviously like the Kent State game, they only gave up 6 points. That was a great game from a defensive standpoint, but you're playing Kent State. Ole Miss is a great team. Really, really stout offense, good quarterback, a couple of really good receivers, a phenomenal running back, and they were able to contain most of that offense all game long. I mean, the score is not even fully indicative of exactly how good the defense played. I think one of the touchdowns they got was off of a almost pick six by KJ Jefferson, where they got the ball on basically the 4-yard line and had to go about 5 yards just to get a touchdown. So you can't really blame that on the defense. So realistically, in my mind, I mean, the defense only gave up, 16, 20 points that were really earned by Ole Miss's offense. And really that's enough to win you games. That really is, especially against good teams like this. That's enough to keep you in a game and to win you a game most of the time. It's just unfortunate that the offense couldn't ever really get anything clicking. So that was definitely sad to see. I thought another issue kind of reared its head again. We had significantly more penalties in this game than we did against A&M, and that's not too surprising, frankly. I thought the A&M game we got away with some stuff, and it made us look like we improved when maybe we didn't as much as it looked on paper. This game was a little bit more of a comeback to reality. We had a lot of false start penalties, things of that nature. So kind of came back to reality. We lost the turnover margin. I think that hurt us also. So there's a couple things that didn't go our way, but overall the defense played well enough for us to win this game. The offense just couldn't do anything with the momentum type plays that the defense generated. And so that was it made it a hard game to watch. It just kind of hurt. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and so when you just mentioned, we'll dive into our passing stats. KJ Jefferson, 25-39, 64%, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 17 carries for only 11 yards, and that's a 0.6 yards per carry, so not great on the ground for him. He did have 2 touchdowns, both to Ty Washington. We'll get to him in a minute. But those 2 interceptions, it's just those 2 interceptions weren't like even just like, happened pick play, like tipped balls, anything like that. They just look like very bad interceptions from KJ, where at least the one at the end of the game, he was staring down his receiver 100%, and that was just an easy play for that defender. You see the replay, KJ's head doesn't move at all. He gets the ball He knows where he's going, and it gets picked off. The first one, announcers were saying that it looked underthrown, but when I saw the replay, to me, it didn't look underthrown. It looked like maybe there was some miscommunication about where the receiver was supposed to be, because when you look at KJ throw the ball, it does not look like he underthrew that ball. That's just my perspective, but it was a tough game. Passing, our offensive line, as far as giving KJ time, looked a little bit better. If you want to try to find any kind of positive out of that, he was able to get the ball out a little bit easier compared to just being swamped the entire time. But just an average game for KJ.
Yeah, it was kind of rough. I think that first interception of the game that ended up giving Ole Miss the ball on like the 4-yard line, and it kind of felt like a momentum shifter even more than we could really overcome. Because at that point, I think it was still a 3-0 or 3-7 ball game, something like that. It was pretty close at that point. And to me, it just looked like he didn't read the defense correctly. A linebacker dropped into coverage that he didn't see. He didn't even think that guy was there, and threw kind of a zip pass to a curl route. And there was a linebacker that just kind of dropped into position in between him and his receiver, and he just never saw him. So the ball went right to the linebacker. I mean, it was the easiest interception you'll see. So kind of an unfortunate situation there. So I agree with you. I don't think the ball was underthrown. I think it was just a misread of the defense. So that was definitely kind of a tough way to start it. And then, like you said, that one late in the game, it didn't seem like he was going through his progressions very well. I think he was kind of locking on to certain receivers that he thought he needed to get the ball to, trying to force a play to happen instead of just taking what the defense gives you. So to your point, just a kind of an average game from KJ. I think it can be attributed to a couple different things. He was on the ground a lot. The 17 carries for 11 yards. I mean, he did gain some yards on the rush plays where he did take off. He just took a lot of sacks too, so that makes your rush yards go way down. So definitely kind of a very ugly middle of the pack, not great game, and it just seemed like it couldn't have come at a worse time considering our defense. To me, if you go back and watch, really played a great game. I mean, they did. They were able to disrupt the run game that Ole Miss has been really, really good with so far this year. They got to Jackson Dart. They were getting him on the ground, whether it was sacks or just QB hurries. They weren't able to really get any offensive flow like they normally do for especially a Lane Kiffin coach team. And I thought they did a great job scheming. They hit a lot of pressure. They would blitz some strange packages, bringing an extra core and then dropping your opposite side linebacker back out into coverage. Just some really unique things that I haven't seen from the Arkansas defense in the last couple of years. And they're really starting to kind of improve in that department and be less predictable, and that's been a good thing, and you've seen huge improvements there. So I think that's the thing you really kind of put a highlight on for this game is our defense is making significant improvements compared to last year and years prior. It just is unfortunate that we've been taking these huge regression steps on the offensive side of things, and I think part of that, while we're talking about KJ, it really does come down to KJ. I think KJ himself has regressed a little bit as a passer, even just on how quickly he's able to make reads. Still think we've talked about it before. I still think he's having maybe a few struggles with the Dan Enos offense.
Yeah, I think part of it too, you look at it, that first drive we had looked fantastic. Those short passes, we were dinking and dunking and hitting receivers, drove down the field pretty efficiently. Got bailed out there on that very first set of downs on a third down PI call. But after that, we got into a rhythm and drove the ball actually pretty well. I was like, okay, if we can do like this the entire game, maybe we found something that works in a sense. But, anything after that first drive, it just didn't work. And I think when you look at it with KJ and this Dan Enos offense, because you think about the quarterbacks Dan Enos had when he was at Arkansas, Austin Allen, Brandon Allen, those guys. But if you compare those guys to KJ, I think it's like with KJ trying to fit in that offense, you're trying to put a square peg into a round hole. With KJ, he's a runner. He's an RPO type of guy. And I think Dan Enos' offense is really set on kind of a pocket type passer role. And that's just not KJ. And I think that might be partially why he's struggling with it compared to the Browns offense last year, where it was really based around that RPO option, that run first mentality that KJ has as a passer. And I think that might be attributing to why he seemed like he's regressed.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I think there's a little bit to be desired from just his overall defensive reading awareness. He's good at reading, edge pressure and when to hand the ball and when to keep the ball kind of situation because he's done that so long. But I think he's having a little bit more of a struggle whenever he's actually having to make pass reads on which routes are open, which ones aren't, where the zone defenses are. And I think that's to your point where you're seeing him struggle a little bit and need more time than maybe he is going to get behind our offensive line to find the guy that's open. And so that's something that I think if he could improve on would really be huge for us. And I actually think it'd be huge for him from an NFL scout standpoint. I think that's going to be something that maybe affect his draft stock to an extent, is just his inability so far, at least, to read defenses quickly and make quick reads and make quick decisions and pass the ball quicker than he has been. That's been hurting us.
Yeah. And then when you look over at our rushing stats, nothing really, jumps off the page there. Rocket had 8 carries for 15 yards, which is 1.9 yards per carry, 3 receptions for 26 yards. AJ Green didn't have any carries in this game. He had 1 reception, I believe, for just a few yards. And then you had DeBinion get 4 carries for 10 yards, averaging 2.5 yards per carry with 2 reception and 15 yards. So not great running, but it would, I thought to a little bit Rocket, when you looked at his running, he doesn't necessarily look himself 100%. And I don't know if it's still, he's got some of that knee bothering him, or I don't know what it could be, if it's some of that weight he put on over the offseason, but they still said in practice he looked fast, or if it may be just not give the offensive line, like we said, not giving him time, and it's making him look bad or slow in a sense.
I think maybe a combination of a few of those items, but I think at the end of the day, he has no holes to run through. I mean, he's bouncing off his own lineman half the time, and he's not able to really get a head of steam going north and south because he's trying to dance a little bit and see if there is a hole when there's normally not one, and it just makes it to where he can't get any momentum carrying him, and he just doesn't look like the runner that we've seen in the past due to that. And there may be some truth to maybe a little bit of loss in speed and quickness, but I realistically think at the end of the day, the majority of our running struggles is there's no holes, and what little hole maybe does form gets plugged with a linebacker pretty quick because we don't have enough push to affect those secondary type players from an offensive line run blocking standpoint.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the common theme of what we've talked about, and it's been week in and week out, is the offensive line struggles. And I mean, when you look at our receiving stats, like we just mentioned, not a bad game for our receivers. You had a couple guys with decent numbers. The big one was Ty Washington stepping up at the tight ends position. He had 7 receptions for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he had the 2 touchdowns from KJ this week. And I mean, you really makes you wonder, where did he come from? Like, why has he been playing more if he can do this? He looked like really explosive, quick tight end. And where's he been sitting on the bench? I don't know if he maybe just wasn't getting as much playing time because maybe he doesn't necessarily block as well. But at some point, we need that receiving ability from that position. And you saw what he was able to do in Danny Enos' style offense, where he likes to utilize those tight ends, and you saw that come into fruition here. You also had Andrew Armstrong, another one of KJ's go-to guys, 8 receptions for 86 yards. So no scores for him, but he had some big catches in this game. You had Tyrone Broden get 2 receptions for 23 yards, Isaac Tesla 1 reception, 7 yards, and Jaden Wilson 1 reception for 6 yards. Another thing to note, Tesla 1 reception. It seems like these past 2 or 3 games, it's been 1 reception, 2, 3. Not a lot of balls going his way, and it makes you wonder: is it because, like we said, KJ not going through his progressions quick enough to find him open, or is this SEC level of talent really kind of covering him up and not letting him do what he was expected to do this season?
Yeah, I think there may be a little bit to that for sure. I think there was 3 or 4 targets that went his way that just were either uncatchable balls, or the coverage was really tight. He wasn't able to come down with it. So it wasn't like he just got 1 target in the 1 reception. There was 3 or 4 other passes that came his way that just he wasn't able to come down with, unfortunately. I do think he did draw one of the pass interference calls later in the game, if I remember right. Doesn't count as a reception, but you still get some yards out of it. So unfortunately, that doesn't count for his stats or anything. But those are good plays when they happen. So I think he's still involved. He definitely draws a lot of respect from defensive backs covering him and things of that nature. So it's not like he's just getting outmatched and out talented or anything. I think he still is a major talent for us. I just think some of the games ebbs and flows haven't really gone his way these last couple of weeks, but I still think he's one of our top guys for sure.
Yeah. And I like the emergence of Ty Washington. I really hope to see more of him in the game plan, especially with the loss of Luke Hosh. You need a tight end out there that can catch and kind of give KJ almost in a sense that safety net that he kind of was establishing with Haas. So maybe that's something we'll see more as we go throughout the rest of the season. Ty Washington getting a lot more playing time. And then, like, when we jump over to our defense, like we said, they've been spectacular all season long, especially tremendously improved from last year. And, once again, Gene Thomas, top of the list in tackles, one of the top defensive players on this team, 11 total tackles, 5 solo, 1 tackle for loss. Jaden Johnson, 11 total tackles, 4 solo. Al Walcott, 7 total tackles, 3 solos. Lorando Johnson, 5 total tackles and 4 solo. But another guy that isn't listed here but had a massive game, Trajan Jeffcoat. He was putting pressure on Jackson Dart all night long, especially near the end of the game. You could tell maybe that the Ole Miss line was getting a little worn out, and he was able to just kind of take over. I know the announcers mentioned he was been described as a takeover guy, and when he starts feeling it, he's going to become it constantly. And I think we saw what he can do when he, in a sense, has that takeover mentality.
Yeah, that's one thing you can't always put a number to. Him and Landon Jackson had a great game this game. They were constantly making Jackson Dart's life hard. And like we've said, those are things that you can't always measure with statistics. You can measure some incompletions and things like that in sacks, obviously, but it's not always, a true indicator of how well those guys played. You just kind of have to watch the game and give it the eye test, if that makes sense. But both of those guys had phenomenal games, especially Trajan Jeffcoat. He had a couple tackles for loss. I mean, he was disrupting the run game. He was disrupting the pass game. I mean, they really did play well. The whole unit as a whole, from front to back, from the defensive line all the way back to the safeties and the corners, have improved so much compared to last year. It's just really disheartening to see that it hasn't translated into wins, because that was one thing that hurt us last year. I felt like last year could have been a 8-9 win year if our defense hadn't been giving up 500 yards a game. And it just seems like we can't always have it at the same time. We can't get the defense and the offense on the same page at the same time. So it's been kind of a tough pill to swallow this year so far. I know a lot of the fans probably could agree with that seems like you never can have both things happening at the right time, but still something you can be proud of and happy to see these guys improving the way they are and feel confident that you made some good hires.
Yeah, it's like you said, it seems like that never lines up where we can have great defense and offense at the same time. If we had this defense last year, like you said, you're looking at, we probably would have beat LSU at home. We probably would have beat Liberty. There's maybe another 1 or 2 wins in there that you get you to that 9-win mark. And you're looking at last season a whole lot different than, us just going to the bowl game and beating Kansas. But if we could, it's like a lot of people have said, if we could have last year's offense with this year's defense, and maybe you could have got that. It's a big if maybe Browse would have stayed. Who knows? You never really know. If we still have these offensive line problems, it doesn't matter who's your offensive coordinator. And it brings up something I do want to talk about is, we just mentioned Ty Washington kind of exploded onto the scene here after he had a decent bowl game last year, but hadn't been seen at all this season until this game. It was brought up, we have several highly recruited offensive linemen that came in either this past class that are just sitting on the bench. Maybe we've tried switching up these guys that have been starting the entire season. At some point, I feel like you got to give these other guys a shot. What you're doing isn't working, and that's the definition of insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And at what point does Sam say, hey, we're going to give you a shot. Here's your opportunity. Let's go see what you can do.
I think at the end of the day, one of the biggest things that I would be at least curious to see is, you might throw a guy out there that has a little bit less experience blocking, and maybe not quite as talented as a Brady Latham or somebody like that. But do they give up as many penalties? I'm not trying to point fingers specifically, but that name seems to come up a lot when the penalty flags come out. And those plays that get you behind the sticks on 1st and 10 and set you up on like a 1st and 20 or a 1st and 15 if it was a hold or a false start or something, or even, like you've got a 3rd and 1 situation and you get a little twitchy and now boom, you're in 3rd and 6 and your whole playbook implodes on what you were trying to do there. So even if maybe the blocking isn't quite as good as maybe one of the senior guys, is the discipline maybe a little bit better? I mean, and at that point, there's some things to think about on, do you give up a little bit of maybe run blocking ability for somebody that doesn't have as many penalties or whatever the case may be? And at this point, I think I'd like to see that, just because I don't think the run blocking ability or the pass blocking ability has been what we expected out of these guys anyway. So in a sense, what do you have to lose, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and I feel like to that point, it's like it's hard to imagine this getting any worse. I'm sure those guys couldn't do any worse than what's going on right now. And maybe some of these guys, that would motivate them. They get benched for a game. Their whole mentality could change, and then they come back looking better. Different guys need to motivate in different ways. And as much as that would suck for those players, but maybe that's what they need, to be benched for a game and their starting spot in jeopardy unless they come out and work hard and have some type of change. So it'll be interesting to see what this week holds. I don't know if that will actually happen. It's been clear this season so far, Sam Pittman's remained loyal to these guys, starting 5 that he's had, whether it be in different positions on the line or, we saw after halftime last week going back to the original positioning of Bo Limmer at center and everything, and still is not working. But we'll jump over to special teams, where Satania had one punt return for 2 yards, so not a lot of opportunities for him, as we didn't force a ton of punts for Ole Miss, and most of the ones that were fair catches. You had Cam Little, 2 for 2 on field goals. Money, it seems like he's been the one consistent guy all year long, and he even hit a 56-yard field goal in this game, which was a big distance for him. We've seen him do it before, but, this was just another good clutch kick by Cam Little, which we've come to expect year in and year out. So great things on special teams there. Penalties-wise, you mentioned it at the top of the show, 10 for 17 yards. That 17 yards isn't terrible, but you look at the number, 10 penalties, that's just not very dedicated or disciplined. Yeah, not very disciplined when you have 10 penalties. And like you said, a lot of those being those twitches, those false starts that, like you said, put you in a hole. So don't know what Coach Pittman's going to do this week, but maybe we change up things again. I don't know. I know a couple of notes on the depth chart that was released for this week was Ty Washington is slated in at that starting spot, so we'll see more of him. And then the rest of the way, I don't know. There's some injury news out there. I think McLaughlin's been practicing this week. I know they said there was 3 different guys that practiced off to the side yesterday. Jalen Braxton and a couple other guys practicing off to the side. So we'll have to see. Hopefully those guys will be fine for this week. I know our defense got beat up a little bit in this Ole Miss game, but hopefully nothing too serious, and we can have a full defense for this weekend against Alabama.
It'll be tough sledding.
Yeah, very true. As we wrap up here, SEC week results, you have LSU beating Missouri 27-20, and this was a very close, exciting game that, quite frankly, I was glad LSU to beat Missouri, because it just seems weird for Missouri to be as good as they are. It just doesn't make sense. And you have Mississippi State beating Western Michigan in a non-conference matchup, 41-28. Alabama beating Texas A&M 26-20. A lot of people thought A&M was going to come in this game, and they kept it close. But I think you're seeing Saban and this Alabama team really find their rhythm and what they can be. Their quarterback play is still not the best, but I think it's improved from the beginning of the year to now enough to, like you said, get these wins. They're not blowing people out, but they're still getting the wins. And then you have Florida beating Vanderbilt 38-14. And Georgia comes out after a close scare last week and beats Kentucky 51-13. I think that was maybe their wake-up call last week, and they came out this week, and this is the more traditional Georgia you expect to see all season, is a blowout 51-13.
Yeah, crazy thing is too is Kentucky's a great team this year. They're not bad. So being able to come out and absolutely shut that run game that Kentucky has down, think that was a good sign for Georgia fans about their defense. It's kind of been a little bit wishy-washy so far. And then Carson Beck, their quarterback, it seemed like he's finally figured it out, which is unfortunate for the rest of the SEC because they've kind of had a little bit of a rocky start this year, having a new quarterback come in and take over for Stetson Bennett. But I think he's kind of starting to click on all cylinders. Their offense looked good. Their defense looked even better. And they finally looked like a national championship #1 ranked team against a really good Kentucky team.
Yeah. And so we'll take a quick break right here, and we'll be back, and we'll recap the Arkansas Red-White Showcase that happened last week with a lot of optimism, especially after this game going into this Arkansas basketball season.
You know what I like? I like to be comfortable. I also love representing my favorite sports teams. And in the Clutch, I am able to have the best of both worlds. In the Clutch Apparel is your one-stop shop for all things sports. They have officially licensed gear from all your favorite teams and players from the NHL, MLB, NFL, and more. They have sports classic tees from yesteryear and beyond. Check out their full website in the link down below. When you enter the promo code Variety Sports, you get 10% off everything site-wide. Feel comfortable with your sports apparel and go over to their website now at intheclutch.com. And don't forget to use our code Variety Sports to get 10% off.
All right, we are back here, and we will jump to Arkansas basketball, where Arkansas had their Red-White Showcase last week. And in this game, Red beats White 88-70. But in one of these games, the scores doesn't necessarily matter. It was the play you get to see from this team, kind of how they gel together with some of these incoming transfers. You know, what kind of improvements do guys make from last year to this year? And I think one of the top guys that I was glad to see a leap from this year is a guy that we liked when we saw him last year, played for the red team, Joseph Pinion. He came out in the red-white game, 20 points, where he went 7 of 8 from the field, 3 of 4 from three-point line, 3 of 4 from the free throw line, 4 rebounds, 1 assist. Great game by Joseph Pinion. I think we're going to probably see a lot more of him this year, especially because we've lacked that outside shooting last year. And, you know, that's his game. And I think the key for him this year on getting on the court is not being a defensive liability. That was what we saw last year. Was sure, he could come in and hit some three-pointers, but when you went to the defensive side of the court, he struggled. And so I think this could be a big leap for year 1 to year 2 for him.
Yeah, he's put on a few pounds. He looks a little bit more muscled up compared to what he looked like last year as a freshman. So that's going to bode well for him from a defensive standpoint, no matter how you slice it. And from what everybody's saying, his footwork has gotten a lot better on defense, and so that's going to help him as well. So I think there's been a lot of work go in the offseason for Joseph Pinion. I think that's already going to show through. The scoring ability is there. I mean, there's no arguing that. So I'll be curious to see, you know, once they get into, you know, seasonal play outside of opponents that how he looks on defense. But I do think he's going to have a much bigger role this year than he did last year. I expect him to have improved kind of across the board from an offense and defense standpoint.
Yeah. And then you look at another guy that has generated some buzz for Arkansas, L. Ellis for the red team. He put up 16 points, 8 of 10 from the field, 0 for 1 from the three-point line, 6 assists, 1 steal. This is a guy that can come in, I think. You saw him at Louisville last year, and he struggled in some turnovers and that type of errors. But when you look at that Louisville team last year, you know, it was a team that Arkansas did play in the Maui Invitational last year. But he was really the only, and I don't discredit other players, but the only guy for Louisville that could really do anything. And so he really he put that team on his shoulders, and that's why you see him having a lot of turnovers and things of that nature, because he was trying to do it all. When he gets in this Musselman system where he's got a ton of talent around him, and that's one thing I will notice and did notice in the first half is he's still trying to shake off that kind of I have to do everything myself mentality, and know he can trust those guys that he can dish it out to or give it to in the game. And I think as the season goes, you'll see that get better. But I think there's some exciting play you're going to get to see from L. Ellis this season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I thought the highlight for me is that he shot 10 shots. I think that was something a lot of people, at least online, had a lot of things to say about, you know, his time at Louisville. As he was scoring, you know, 18 points a game, but he was shooting 27 shots a game. which, kind of had to do that being one of their main scoring threats. And we've seen that in years past for the Razorbacks with a couple guys that had to do the same thing. But I don't think he's going to have to do that here. So I am curious to see how Musselman's able to kind of coach him down in a sense, from that mentality, like you said, of feeling like he has to do everything, because he doesn't. Hey, play to your strengths, avoid your weaknesses, and you'll fit right in here, kind of thing. So he's got all the talent in the world. I think Musselman's going to use him to his best ability, and it's really going to be up to Ellis on how much he's able to flourish in Musselman's offense.
Yeah. And then another guy that a lot of intrigue was about with him coming back, could he improve enough to get off that short leash and get a lot more playing time from us? And that guy's Jalen Graham. He came out in the red-white game, had 15 points, where he went 7 from 11 from the field, 1 of 1 from the three-point line, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. So you come out and put out decent numbers. He's a guy that I think it's going to be what's going to determine his playing time is A, defensively, can he come out and not be a liability? He struggled on defense at times last year. And B, he's got to make his free throws. He shot, I believe it was like 36% from the free throw line last year. You can't have that. That's, basically a guy can foul you and expect no points compared to if you just get the bucket and they don't really try to put a lot of pressure on you. It's almost essentially like a hack-a-shack situation where they know if they just foul you, you're not going to make the shot. So why not do that in a sense?
Very true.
And then you jump over to the white team. You had to me, this was one of the biggest focal points of this game that I took away was Jeremiah Davenport, transfer from Cincinnati. He's kind of one of the later transfers to come in towards the end of that transfer portal season. Not a lot known about him. I think the recruiting profile on him was he was kind of a streaky shooter, had some hot streaks, can shoot the deep ball. Well, he came in this game, put up 19 points, where he went 6 of 10 from the field, 5 of 8 from the three-point line, and 2 of 2 from the free throw line. He had 3 rebounds, 2 assists. I really liked his outside shooting, and I think there's a less chance of him being a streaky guy with just the talent in this offense. There's less pressure on him to have to kind of make all those shots. So if he can come in and give us a few 3-pointers a game, I think this season will be drastically better from the outside, just with the guys that we've got between Davenport, Pinion, Layden Blocker can shoot the ball well. Devo can shoot the ball well. I think that was a missing element we had last year that we really struggled with. And I think we've addressed some of those things this year.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think Musselman went out and definitely addressed a little bit of a minor issue that plagued us last year, is not being able to consistently hit enough threes in games to keep us in some of those shootout style offensive games, we got into kind of late in the year.
Yeah. And then another surprise for me when you look at the stat sheet, he quietly filled up the stat sheet, was Bayfall, freshman, center that come in. And I think he'll definitely, at least for the beginning of the year, be lower on the rotation as far as big men. But he came out, had 13 points, shot 5 of 7 from the field, 0 of 1 from the three-point line, and 3 of 4 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 1 assist. He's a guy that's got a lot of potential, that he's very raw. I think defensively he can be able to help us with his length and just his size. Offensively, might take a little bit of work, but if we know Musselman can develop a guy pretty well from just, his resume, if look at all the, NBA talent he's coached here at Arkansas. And I think one of the things with Bay Fall is he is a freshman. I think once you get him a season under his belt, to me, he reminds me, especially with his frame, a lot of a Dwight Howard type of player based on his frame and kind of how he plays a little bit. So I'll be interested to see how Musk can develop him throughout the season.
Yeah, no doubt. He's definitely earned his reputation from a recruit standpoint. I think he's a great player. I think, to your point, there'll be a little bit of an adjustment to the college game. But there's going to be a lot to be had there from a development standpoint. The sky's the limit for somebody of his caliber with his stature and length and everything. I mean, the guy can do a lot. And he's not a horrible shooter either.
Yeah. And then a guy that we saw a lot of last year, started a lot of the games for Arkansas last year's Mekhi Mitchell. As we know, his brother Mikal transferred out to UALR. So, the twins aren't together this year, but I think there's going to be a lot of great play we're going to get to see from Mekhi. He had put up 13 points, 6 of 7 from the field, 1 of 1 from the 3-point line, 0 of 3 from the free throw line. So would like to see that number not be 0 out of 3, but this could be just a weird game. We've got to get to the season and see what happens. And 5 rebounds and 1 assist. I think he's a guy where between Jalen Graham and Mekhi Mitchell and Brazil, you're going to see a rotation of these guys. And between Jalen Graham and Mekhi Mitchell, I think that's going to be situational play. I think if you need more of an offensive big to go along with the Brazil, you're going to play Jalen Graham. If you need more of a defensive-minded player that can come in and help get you some stops and blocks and key defensive situations, that's going to be Mekhi Mitchell.
Yep, I couldn't have said it better myself.
And so a lot of optimism. Arkansas season is going to get kicked off here soon with a couple of exhibition games coming up in the next few weeks. We're going to have an exhibition game against Purdue. That's the big one. Arkansas football's bye week, where it's going to be a good exhibition test for Arkansas, especially playing against a big man like Zach Edey that is plays for Purdue, who decided to come back from last year. He's a guy that you're not going to stop, but you just can find a way to limit what he can do. And I think that'd be a good test for these Arkansas big men.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm excited for it, man.
And then as we drop down here to Arkansas soccer, we'll let Seth catch you up on what's been happening in the soccer universe.
Yeah, so Arkansas kept on the win streak against Georgia on October 5th and won this match 2-1. Scored both of our goals in the first 3 minutes to open the second half, so went scoreless in the first half but came out with a flurry. The first goal, Emily Hauser had a free kick where she sent the ball into the 18-yard box where Delaney missed the initial header but cleaned it up with a powerful shot in the upper right corner. And then senior collar tank Ava Tankersley netted her second game-winning goal after Anna Potagil flicked the header up to Tankersley for the score. So kind of a cool little sequence of events to get the lead there. And then unfortunately turned around on October 8th and finally kind of lost the win streak we had going in conference play and fell to Auburn 2-1. That was our first conference loss. So kind of went on a pretty good run there to start conference play, beat some really good teams, especially that Alabama game at home. That's really one to remember. Unfortunately failed in this game. It's going to happen. You're going to have those close losses from time to time. We've talked about it kind of earlier in the season. We had a draw earlier as well. So nothing to freak out about, I don't think. It's not like we got out there and just actually got ran off the field or anything of that nature. So Arkansas's only goal came by Tank again, Ava Tankersley, in the 53rd minute. Was assisted by Morgan White. And like I said, unfortunately dropped this game. But I think Arkansas soccer is still in a great position. It's unfortunate to lose the kind of hyped up win streak that we had going in conference play, but I know we'll get right back on track. And we've got a really, really good team this year. A lot of highlight plays being made. You get on YouTube and you can actually see some of these big highlights. They're making Hog headline pages and stuff. There's some really cool plays out there. So definitely go give it a watch, catch games when you can, and definitely show up to games when you can when they're at home. These girls have earned your respect from a fan base standpoint.
Yeah, very true. Couldn't have said it better. They get the chance to get back on in the winning column this Thursday as they take on Florida, another big conference matchup as the Gators come to town. It'll be interesting to see if Kobe Hill gets this team back into, we lost. It's one loss in conference. It's not that big of a deal. Don't let it set on it, kind of, in a sense, flush the tape, go back, watch it. If improvements can be taken from it, take it, but then just forget about it, move on. Don't let it roll into other games. And I think Kobe Hill will have this team ready for this matchup on Thursday. And then as we jump over to Arkansas Volleyball continued its winning streak as they went down to Baton Rouge and got to win 3-0, and then came back home and beat Missouri 3-1 on October 8th. So volleyball still rolling, getting those wins. So they're doing pretty well. Let's see if they can keep rising in that coaches poll. We mentioned last week they jumped up to 13, which is the highest in program history. So we'll see if they can keep on climbing and have success there. On Arkansas softball note, they did receive a commitment from 2025 infielder Brinley Bain. She is expected to be a top 10 recruit. Deifel's doing her thing. It's excited to see, this team this year. They I think this year's team has the chance to be explosive, get ready for a lot of runs. They played up in a tournament up in Kansas this weekend, I believe, and it wasn't televised or anything, but the softball Twitter page did a really good job of keeping updated, and it seemed like every few seconds somebody was hitting a home run, a grand slam. This team is going to be exciting to watch this year. So if you haven't got season tickets or plan to go into the games, put that on your schedule, because this is going to be an exciting softball season that could be almost more electric than that softball team we had 2 years ago, which made it to supers against Texas, and that was a really good team. And that this team just has that potential to be as good or better than that team.
Very true. I think one of those games they won like 19-5. So they're definitely an explosive team, got a lot of potential. I mean, I expect some of that to maybe come back down to earth in conference play, but I don't know though, man. That team is deep. They are very, very good.
Yeah. And so we'll wrap that up and jump over to our preview of this week's matchup, where Arkansas is going to Tuscaloosa. Got the dreaded 11 a.m. game again. And this game, if I'm just being flat out honest, I don't really think we have a shot to win. Just from the play I've seen so far this season, doesn't give me any hope. I always want to think there is a chance, even though as small or minute it might be, there's always a chance. So this game, Alabama starts out as a 19.5-point favorite with an over-under 48.5. So a little bit smaller over-under. This Bama team hasn't put up crazy numbers like it has in the past, just due to the quarterback struggles. Like we mentioned earlier, they're figuring it out a little bit, but this may be a chance where our improved secondary takes advantage of not a great quarterback at Alabama. So we'll see what happens in that aspect of the game. Alabama comes in averaging 31.2 points per game, and they average 360 total yards per game with 216.3 passing, 143.7 rushing. They're allowing 299.5 yards with 193.3 passing, 106.2 rushing. So they're letting some yards get by, but they may not have as a dominant defense as they has in the past. But Arkansas's offense hasn't showed me that they can do anything either. And I think that's going to be the tough point.
I think you're right. I don't think it's the Alabama defenses of years gone by, but they're good still, and we're not great from an offensive line standpoint. So I don't expect us to just come out here and have wild success against them. Unfortunately, at the beginning of this year, I really had high hopes for this game, that this might be the year that we can pull it out, considering they, even at the beginning of the year, everybody knew that they didn't have a good quarterback situation. They still don't. And I thought we had a good quarterback situation. I think we still do. I just think there's been some hiccups along the way, especially from the offensive line, some of the scheming, things of that nature. I mean, like you said, there's always a chance. I definitely think there's potential that we keep this game way closer than the spread shows. Very similar to like the Ole Miss game. I think we were a 13-point underdog in that game, and I don't think Ole Miss ever had a 13-point lead on us the entire game. So we covered the spread from front to back on that game. Unfortunately, couldn't pull it out. But if our defense plays anything like they have been, they're going to keep us in this game, at least to an extent. I'm just curious to see if the offense is able to maybe find a spark. I don't know really what that spark needs to be. I thought Ty Washington might have been against Ole Miss. Just kind of didn't pan out at the end, that we were able to really do enough when we had offensive possessions that the defense gifted us to really get back into that game against Ole Miss. I'm scared that this is going to be another kind of similar situation. That said, you never really know what happens. If we can come out and really, dominate the turnover margin by a substantial factor, 3-1, 3-0, something like that. If we can come out, get a couple interceptions, force a fumble, and play really clean offensive football on our end, even if you have to punt a few times, that's okay. As long as you're not, giving the ball over to Alabama on the 15-yard line. Maybe there'll be a little bit better shot for us to keep this game close and maybe have a chance to sneak one out in Tuscaloosa. But like you said, I don't fully expect this to be a win for Arkansas at all. I just want to see improvements. I want to see the defensive play sustain, see if we can come back out and have another pretty good defensive showing, even if we lose. Those are the things you want to see, is that type of consistency from a defensive standpoint. And then whatever the offense is able to do, I'm just going to be looking for improvement there, whether it's a little bit better run blocking, a little bit more sustained passing drives where we don't make as many mistakes on reads or things like that. Those are the things you got to watch for. Hopefully it doesn't get ugly. That's just kind of the things I'm hoping for, is that it's at least an entertaining game from front to back.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. I hope we keep it at least respectable. I saw a stat today. I'm not 100% if it's accurate, but I saw that it said that Arkansas is the only SEC West team to not beat Nick Saban at Alabama, which noted our history against Alabama. Wouldn't be surprising if that was accurate. I think back about several close games, but I know I couldn't remember the last time we actually beat them. It's been a long time. But
2006 or something like that.
Yeah, a long time ago. And so, like you said, not really expecting a win here. Just hope Arkansas can keep it respectable. But with that said, anybody can win on any given day. If Sam can get this team fired up and they can find some way to put some offensive drives together, there's a chance. There's always a chance. But just based on the track record of the season, I honestly don't see it.
Yeah.
And then
hurts to say that.
Yeah, it does. But when you start talking about players you've got to watch for Alabama defensively, if our defense is going to have another good game, is Jalen Milroe. He's 6'2", 220, not the biggest passer. We've seen that in the struggles that he's had at the beginning of the year. A big part of why Alabama did lose that Texas game is his passing ability. He's only 75 for 11 on the season with a 67% completion rate for 1,159 yards. He has 9 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. And here's the part that he really excels in is 57 carries for 158 yards and 4 touchdowns. If you remember last year, he came in against Arkansas here in Fayetteville when Bryce Young went out, really torched the defense with his rushing ability. To be fair, our defense was terrible last year, but it just kind of shows he's got some speed and he can make some guys miss.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that at all. Hopefully we can contain him and not over pursue and pass rushes and not let him get out of the pocket and just take off for 50 yards.
Yeah. And then the running back you got to look at for Alabama this game is Chase McClellan, 5'11", 212. On the season, he has 79 carries, 371 yards, and 3 touchdowns, 8 receptions for 61 yards. So, maybe not as a notable name as in some of these running backs in Alabama history, but, not a bad running back for Alabama. They've got he's a decent guy. Maybe not put him as numbers like Derrick Henry or Mark Ingram or guys like that. But he's still a solid running back for this Nick Saban Alabama team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He's quietly had a pretty good year, actually. The touchdowns aren't quite there as much as you might would think, but they're not as much of a high formation ground and pound team as they used to be either. So he's had a really good year, though, all things considered.
Right. And then you jump over to their top receiver, Jermaine Burton, 6', 194. He really had a breakout game this past week against A&M. Really probably was what helped them win that game. On the season, he only has 17 total receptions, but 386 yards. So he's averaging. He's a big play, deep threat guy that has 4 touchdowns on the season, with at least 2 of those coming last week, I believe, against Texas A&M. So a guy that I think they really wanted to get going, and I think maybe last week could have been the game that he needed to kind of really find himself. Maybe Arkansas can come in and shut that down a little bit, but, clearly I think I saw 17 receptions, 386 yards. That's about 25 yards per catch, I believe, if you do the math there. So, that's a deep threat guy right there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He's explosive. He's kind of one of those guys that seems like he's open every play, kind of like a Malik Neighbors type player. It's just is Milroe able to get him the ball accurately every play? I think that's really where the issues have been for them so far this year. It's not really that Jermaine's not open. It's just that they've had a little bit of inconsistency on getting him the ball. So if they start clicking a little bit on offense, it's kind of going to be a scary thing for teams.
Yeah. And as we jump over injury updates for Arkansas, not a ton. Like we said, we might be getting McGlothern back this week as he's went through practice so far these first few days. Some of those other guys we're still iffy about. We don't have any for sure designations on guys that's going to be out besides, we know Luke Haas is out But, we'll keep you updated there as we find out information. Expectation improvements for Arkansas this game, like we said, we just want to see some type of improvement from this offense, whether it be offensive line play, running back play, something where we can maybe put up some points to keep this game respectable. If not, that it's going to be a really tough game to look at the end of the day and see, well, what did Arkansas do? Now, let me pose you this question. Say Arkansas somehow finds it in them, comes in here and beats Alabama. Do you think that takes a little bit of pressure off Pittman for this season, or do you still think it's a tough season?
Well, I think in a sense, this big what if, first off. But if for some reason that does happen, and then the rest of the year goes decent, and maybe you win against Mississippi State, and maybe split Auburn, Missouri, I don't really know. Finish the year with 5-6 wins, something like that. But having that resume win against Alabama would be kind of big. I think to an extent, maybe the seat gets a little less hot. I don't even know if it's really hot right now. There's a lot of speculation back and forth from all kinds of fans on that. He's fine, he's not fine. Fans are frustrated. Is the athletic department frustrated or not, like the fans are? Who knows? But I think that is a win you could really kind of hang your hat on in a sense, and then go back and look at some of these other losses that we've had and say, look, A&M beat us kind of bad, not really that bad. And we had a couple of issues there that really hurt us. If we'd have scored touchdowns in the first, our first 2 drives instead of settle for field goals, that's a real close game. LSU game was a real close game. Ole Miss game was a real close game. I mean, BYU game was a real close game. You kind of get into the same situation that we were in last year. We kind of underperformed, but we lost like 4 games by 3 points or less, and you flip the script on half of those or all of those, and boom, it goes from a decent year at, I think we were 6-6, 7-6 with the bowl win, to 9-4 with your bowl win. I mean, you can kind of what if yourself to death, but I do think if we do beat Alabama, and then take into perspective, we've had some pretty close game losses. It's not like we've really gotten run out of the arena on any of our losses. Maybe it puts things in perspective a little bit more that, Pittman's not doing just a horrible job, guys. It just kind of has a bad taste in our mouth because maybe we had a little bit of higher expectations than was realistic going into the year. I don't know. That's just kind of my thought on it. I don't think we're going to win against Alabama. I think if we keep this game close, it kind of still keeps the argument around that, like, look, we're not over the hump yet, but we're not getting blown out like we were when Chad Morris was here. So everybody stop freaking out. Maybe give it a little bit more time, let Enos kind of get some offense established here. We're running a completely different scheme than we used to. So things are going to kind of have some growing pains, and maybe we were wrong as a fan base to expect us to have a great offense like we've had the last couple of years. So there's definitely a lot of different angles you can think about this at, whether we win or lose the Alabama game. Definitely going to add a wrinkle to it if we somehow pull this win out. I agree with you.
Yeah, very true. And I think it's like, I think both of us, included with a ton of the fan base, really, in a sense, drink the Kool-Aid on the optimism and the preseason hype. We try not to every year, try to remain cautiously optimistic, as I'll put it, but it never fails. Once you get closer and closer to the season opener, and you just get really excited, and to see the results that we've got compared to what we expected. I mean, realistically, I could see us being 4-2, maybe 5-1 right now, if we would have had offense.
If the offense was that much better, yeah, no doubt, I agree. And just a little better.
Yeah, it's just a tough. To me, I've come to the realization this is the life of a Razorback fan. Tough losses, unexpected wins, unexpected losses. Season's not going how it's expected to. But I will say, with the optimism, hey, basketball season's right around the corner. So if you're abandoning football, there's some good tidbit for you. Arkansas basketball is close. High expectations there. I expect another good run from Eric Musselman and this deep Arkansas team. But as we wrap up that preview, we'll jump into some upcoming events. As we mentioned, Arkansas soccer back at home, taking on Florida October 12th at 6 p.m. Arkansas swimming and diving finally back in action after a few weeks break as they travel to LSU on October 12th at 1 p.m. and then the following day at UALR on October 13th at 10 a.m. You have Arkansas volleyball taking on Ole Miss October 13th at 7 p.m. Arkansas men's and women's cross country taking on Virginia on October 14th. Then you have Arkansas football, as we mentioned, this Saturday, October 14th at 11 a.m. So get up early and be ready for that game. As much as, like we said, we don't think there is a way Arkansas wins this, but who knows? You never know. This is the Arkansas team. Like I just said, you never know what you're going to get. They could come out and surprise some people. And then Arkansas volleyball follows that up with their own match versus Alabama on the 15th at 6 p.m. So a lot of things going on. As much as this team struggles, we still got to cheer on the Razorbacks. It's not the season we hoped for, but maybe we can find some light at the end of the tunnel there. And who knows, we still got a lot of season left. We're only halfway through. A lot of things could change by the end of the year. But with that being said, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Go like and subscribe our YouTube page. Drop some comments for us. We check out those for every video and episode we put out. So thank you for listening to today's episode of Woo Pig Weekly, and we'll be right back here next week.